Hey there, browncoats. Train Job has the unenviable task of being written as a replacement pilot episode. Fox didn't like the pilot they had created, and so this was cooked up. Despite being the pilot, it still had the job of being a cog in the wheel at the same time. As I'm breaking the episodes down in the intended sequence of events, I'll be looking at this episode as a continuation of the story rather than the pilot it was aired as. The episode begins in a bar where the low camera pans around showing off the mixture of cultures on display. We come to Mal, Zoe and Jane having a drink, and I like the small detail of the belly dancer slyly handing Mal something. The trio are playing a game which nicely represents Mal and Zoe's strategic styles.
That's a bold move.
I live on the edge.
Before they are interrupted.
I got words. I'm saying this is an auspicious day.
The game also foreshadows what's about to happen. Mal goes for a drink, purposefully standing next to the loudmouth at the bar, when he predictably starts a fight. Mal lives life on the edge, while Zoe uses stealth. This won't be the last time that we see the different schools of thought. The brawl is taken outside, where things turn a little hairy.
Somebody needs to put you down, dog. What do you think?
I'm thinking we'll rise again.
As mentioned before, the crew play like family, and Serenity is a part of that family. You feel the sense of a protective guard dog as she rears over the cliff and faces down the men outside. Back on board, ironically, it's Jane laughing at the IQ of the locals. Mal feigns ignorance at starting the fight, and we see the piece of paper that was slipped to him was indeed part of the story. In the medical bay, River is having nightmares, and we get a glimpse of what's being done to her. Simon's question,
You know who I am.
is very telling of how little he knows about her current condition, and her response
Simon.
indicates the start of a growing frustration in River. Mal comes in just in time to see a little of River's brilliance.
Core class code 03-K64. Firefly.
Well, that's something.
They have a brief discussion about Mal's antics, and River points out that Mal means bad in Latin. This rather nicely sums up what Mal thinks of himself, despite not being entirely true, and acts as a statement of his more pragmatic outlook.
Now this is all the money Niska gave us in advance.
Mal runs into Book, who also reminds him of Simon's bravery and good nature, before comparing him to Mal,
There's not many would take him in either.
further emphasising the comparison made in the pilot. Mal tries to shrug it off, but Book points out the clear folly in taking on Simon and River.
And they will want her back. You're not overly fond of the boys, so why risk it?
Well, because it's the right thing to do.
Their dialogue wonderfully encapsulates the difference between wisdom and sense. They're discussing the merits in otherwise foolhardy behaviour, Mal using common sense for his side and Book his wisdom. Just in case anyone's wondering what the difference is, common sense leans into a more practical view, using logical steps, whereas wisdom is a more holistic perspective. Book's questions are somewhat rhetorical, as he expects Mal to answer in a way that counteracts his true motives and opinions. Anara's brushing Kaylee's hair and talking when Mal barges in.
What the hell's going on in the engine room? Were there monkeys?
I had to rewire the grav thrust because somebody won't replace that crappy compression coil.
Well,
Notice this is Kaylee's second reference.
Compression coil busts were drifting.
Don't ignore the mechanic. Despite his callousness, Mal does actually care about Anara, and it's small moments like this that start those same feelings in her. They arrive at the space station and are greeted by Niska's henchmen. Like in the pilot, Mal brings Zoe and Jane along. This establishes a pattern, helping to solidify their jobs within the crew. Mal previously spoke about Niska's reputation, and here we find out it's well deserved.
My wife's nephew. At dinner, I'm getting earful.
The scene both services to show us that Niska is an intimidating villain rather than just telling us he is. His comments on Mal's reputation is also a note on show versus tell. Though not intentional, I see this as a metaphor for Fox, Whedon and their relationship. Fox wanted a more action-packed pilot episode leading to the creation of Train Job. It especially feels like the writer's been under a microscope from Fox.
Anything goes wrong, then your reputation only gossip, and things between us not so solid.
We cut to the train where Mal and Zoe are on board and get underway when they come across the Alliance soldiers. Notice anything familiar about their uniforms?
Private Ace Levy and Lieutenant John Rico.
Come on, you if you want to live forever!
This is some beautifully apt costume design to represent the Alliance. From what we have seen so far, the Alliance represents a pompous government that favours the rich inner circle while ignoring the impoverished outer rim. We mainly see them from Mal's perspective and as a fascist regime. Starship Troopers is a satirical take on the propaganda of the American war machine, the uniforms being reminiscent of Nazi Germany. Using them here creates a wonderful symmetry between the show and the movie, both dealing with themes of war and unjust war. Back on Serenity, Book and Anara are left to converse while the others do crime. Book is feeling a little useless, being unable to help, and Anara suggests praying, as she does. As with the previous episode, their scene together conjures imagery of a concubine looking for Christ and a man of God ready to take action. In this way, they act as a subversion of the genre that the show aspires to be. Mal and Zoe argue the wisdom of still pulling a job under the nose of the Alliance troops while Serenity gets into position. Jane crashes one of Kaylee and Simon's moments, continuing to be the crass, bullish member of the group. Meanwhile, River observes them from the gantry. This is one of the times we see her observing the others quietly. The camera pans to her rather than snapping, giving the impression she has been there a while. They commence the heist, and predictably it doesn't go smoothly. A soldier comes in, hitting Jane in the leg and forcing Mal and Zoe to escape and hide in the train. This forces them to get off in the town the cargo was meant for, and pushes them to find out what the cargo was for.
Stole a guy around medicine.
We get a brief scene of the Alliance to hit home the message they genuinely have no care for the small townsfolk.
The sheriff requested we deploy a few to help him investigate.
These are federal marshals, not local narcotic hounds.
The crew are fighting over the best course of action when interrupted by River.
Just keep coming until they get back what you took.
She is of course referring to the government tracking her and Simon, but could be misconstrued for their own predicament.
This Adlai Niska you're talking about?
Now, how would a shepherd know a name like that?
Indeed. How does a shepherd from the Abbey know a name like that?
As I've heard it, he made a deal with the captain. If Niska finds out he's being held and may speak as to who hired him, I think we're better off being a little late.
Jane wasn't wrong in his assessment that being late would be bad, but here again we're seeing Book's wisdom, and getting a very real sense that this has not been cultivated on loose theory. Zoe and Mal are interviewed by the sheriff, who is onto them.
It's funny, your uncle never went to mentioning the Bowden's problem. Or that Joey Bloggs ate his own gun about 8 months back.
Jane is looking to finish the job before passing out.
Did he just go crazy and fall asleep?
And they send Anara to get Mal and Zoe out. Anara almost glides as she comes into the room and hits Mal. It's a flawless performance, partly because of her training, and partly because I think she's been waiting to do that for a while. Compare this to Zoe, whose performance is less than believable.
I was weak.
Mal decides to take the cargo back when Niska's men show up. Mal tries to negotiate, and when it doesn't seem to be going well, he attempts to Han Solo Crow, but he's too quick. This is the second time that we've seen Mal be quick on the draw, and though less successful, it tells us he's willing to shoot first rather than to be shot at. A fight commences and Mal is saved by Jane.
Nice shot. I was aiming for his head.
Mal and Zoe return the goods where the sheriff is waiting.
But a man learns all the details of a situation like ours. Well, then he has a choice.
This scene is the payoff that Shepherd Book was attempting to pry from Mal at the start of the episode. Mal has a moral code.
I don't believe he does.
He attempts one last time to negotiate with Crow.
Now this is all the money Niska gave us in advance.
And the episode ends on a setup given earlier by River. Train Job is a fine episode. It introduced some antagonists and plays with the notion of morality when pressed. Mal's first priority is to his crew, which means dealing with unsavoury sorts to keep them in work. Although, when confronted with immoral consequences of completing the job,
then he has a choice.
Mal says he doesn't think he does, despite his aversion to the gospel.
You're welcome on my boat. God ain't.
He does still live by a code, and he is making a choice, by doing what's right.
You entered into an arrangement with Mr. Niska. There is no mind changing.
By doing so, he places his crew in danger. So despite saying there isn't a choice, there actually is a tough choice. The episode may not add too much to the character dynamics set out in the episode Serenity, but it does continue to reaffirm them. We get a little more of Book's past, see a little of Kaylee's crush, evidence of Nara's station as a companion, and, well...
time for some thrilling heroics.